Welcome to the Season 6 premiere of Shades of Us. I'm your host, Daryl Brown. Shades is a show that examines the cross-section of race, gender, and culture. We travel throughout New York City, exploring all the shades of what former Mayor David Dinkins called a gorgeous mosaic. This time, we're coming to you from a baseball field in Prospect Park, Brooklyn. Sites like these behind me are often the location of a rite of passage between many dads and their kids. The throwing of the ball as they discuss something as seminal as the first crush or daunting as their next step in life has become a bit of a tradition for fathers and sons in particular. It's become a clear signal that many more modern fathers want to take a more active role in their children's lives. We'll tell you more about those dads right after this. According to a 2022 Pew Research Center survey of U.S. parents and personal identity, 85% of fathers with children under 18 say being a parent is the most important aspect of who they are as a person. What started out as a podcast has ballooned into a movement of hip-hop dads that are changing the narrative around fatherhood and the roles Black and brown men play in their children's lives.
When I started on my fatherhood journey, it was my intention to raise the next generation of hip hop. So my name is Esteban Serrano, and I am a television producer, director, writer, author, and podcaster. I have a podcast called Rap Dads, where I sit down and interview rappers, producers, anyone in the hip hop space, primarily about fatherhood, how it's impacted their lives, some of the tactics that they employ.
From probably 4 to 6, I knew that pain of not having a dad. At 6 years old, Vaughn Hunter stopped that.
My relationship with my dad, he's always been my hero. My dad had me when he was maybe 20, 21 years old. He was an unapologetic hip hop fan. I could remember anytime we were riding around, we were listening to hip hop. My dad made sure that hip hop wasn't just the soundtrack of our lives. He was making sure that I knew that it was a means of communication. My father was also the only father in my neighborhood in West Philly. I remember one day we're having dinner in the house and we get a knock at the door. And my dad goes to the door and it's one of my teammates and his mother. And his mother asked my father to discipline her son. My father was like, I can't put my hands on your child. And her response was, well, he doesn't have a father. You're the only man in his life. And there's things that I can't do that I need help with. And so my father then kind of really realized the broader responsibility that he had. I could see him becoming like a surrogate father to my friend. So this project, Rap Dads, is very much continuing that energy and that legacy. This is my way of helping out our community. My father would tell me, if not daily, it's my job to make you a better man than I am. I've designed my parenting style. I've imparted and broke down lyrics like my father. I bought my son a DJ set. My youngest son was a hype man. My middle son was the MC. They would perform together. And God's humor is, tell them your dreams and then watch them all crumble, because my sons are now rock stars. And they play prog rock, noise, metal thing, and I have no idea where that came from. I'm very proud that I created a space where they felt like they could do whatever they wanted and take, their talents and their creativity in their own direction, and didn't feel like dad is the rap dad and now I have to be that. But I am a little hurt that they don't resonate with hip hop as much as I do. What were some of the worries or concerns that you had being 19, about to be a dad?
My first number one fear is, am I going to abandon this little boy?
When rap artists come in, they're usually guarded for interviews. So I tried to find commonalities that, I can use to kind of break the ice. So I started to just sit down and talk to some of these rappers only about fatherhood. And then the reactions that I was getting let me know that this was where I wanted to focus on. I believe one of the first interviews I did was with a rapper from Philly named Tone Trump. He's a father, he's also a devout Muslim. His nickname is the Muslim Don. And I felt like it was a great conversation to be had because of the Islamophobia that America was suffering from at the time. This was, again, 2017. So there was a lot of tension in regards to that. The podcast subject matter is different. Sometimes I'll do what we call a solo pod, and it's just me spewing on a topic that, you know, I've experienced in my personal life that I feel like may resonate with others. And then sometimes it's just me sitting down having a conversation with another father, most of the time being a rapper. One of my favorite questions is about their biggest failure as a father. I feel like we learn a lot more from our failures than we do from our successes.
Learn how to communicate better with your kids. I learned that by failing at it.
Right.
You know, where she wouldn't talk to me. Now she comes and talks to me all the time.
Race comes up a lot in our conversation. A lot of times it's because we're raising Black children. A lot of the artists that I'm talking to or people that I'm talking to, they're predominantly the only people of color in their neighborhoods. We're coming from, you know, the hood, or we're coming from inner cities where it's either predominantly Black or very diverse, going into spaces where we're the only people of color. So we have to navigate those experiences as well as we have to bring up our children to be prepared for some of the things that they may encounter. A huge chapter in the Rap Dad's legacy was definitely the book, The 10 Dad Commandments, Fatherhood Through the Lens of Hip Hop. Biggie was one of my favorite rappers, but also a huge inspiration behind the style in which the book was shaped. I wrote the book because during the pandemic, we were hearing stories about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. The mortality of me as a Black man was also very much at the forefront of my mind. I started to think, if I go sooner than I would want, are my children prepared for when they become fathers? In the book, I tell stories about my experiences from rap dads with other fathers and their wisdom. I started to really utilize social media to help really get the message out. And then I noticed other accounts would also be sharing it, and a lot of the artists would also clip out certain parts and put it on theirs, and I was getting feedback. Oddly enough, I get a lot of DMs and messages from moms. A lot of mothers are grateful, you know, for the content that I'm sharing with them. It's rap dads, but you know, I'm learning a lot about parenting in general from your content. My ultimate vision for Rap Dads is that it is a community. I want to keep in mind as many unique fatherhood journeys as possible and try to equip these men for the road ahead. It's not a vanity play. It's not a like, let's talk to rappers about how cool they are as fathers. It's like, no, let's talk about the most important role and responsibility that any man who becomes a father takes on in their lives. At the end of the day, my job as a dad is to make great humans. Make humans who are understanding and that are loving and, you know, accepting of others. The more that I can help push that agenda, then I feel like the more impact that we'll have on the world.
It's often said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Up next, we'll see how a fathers and sons portrait project allowed a photographer to explore his relationship with his absent father and his own struggles with being a dad.
As a photographer, you have a day pass into a world that you would normally not get into. My name is Dirk Arnschütz. I'm a photographer and I'm working on a portrait series about fathers and sons. I'm born in Germany and I came to the US when I was 22 years old. I kind of stumbled into photography. I always liked it as a hobby when I was a teenager. In 2012, I became the father of a son, Raymond. I'm also the only child of a single mom, and I've never met my dad. And so, as I was dealing with becoming a father, there were definitely moments when I felt that I didn't have a male role model about raising the child. And I was interested in how other fathers were dealing with their kids, were dealing with their sons in particular. And so the project started out as a very personal thing, kind of taking pictures of friends that were also fathers of sons. But then it turned into, the more pictures I took, the more became a little bit bigger than that, because I also could see that in America there are so many different ways to grow up and so many different ways to be a father, that as the project got bigger and bigger, it almost became like a lens to look at America. America is a kind of a polarized country right now, and that also bleeds into how people raise their children. But on the other hand, there's also like a lot of stuff that's like really similar in how people raise their children, like the love for their family, the love for their children. The struggles that they have are actually very, very similar, no matter what your background is, no matter where you come from. Jason, as a firefighter, he's definitely into keeping things secure and protection and making sure things are safe. But he's also a surfer, and he has a lot of self-confidence in his physical abilities. And, so he's fine on a skateboard with his son. And I love that because in fatherhood, everything is about balance. So this was also a picture that took a while to produce. I wanted to have a hunter and his son because, hunting is such a, throughout thousands and thousands of years, fathers taught their sons how to hunt. Finding an African American hunter was actually not that easy, but I finally succeeded. And so this is Jonathan and Ben. This is also an important picture to me. These are actually our neighbors, Mike and his son Elliot. It's not like an unusual or dramatic picture, or but this is for me emblematic how much fatherhood has changed, because when I was a kid, very few men would have changed the diaper on their kids, and even fewer would have allowed a photographer in the room when they did it. Paula transitioned to become a woman when she was 61. And when she was a man, she was a pastor at a big church in Long Island, quite traditional. And when she came out, she lost all her jobs. And she leads now a small congregation in Colorado. Her son Jonathan is also a pastor in Brooklyn. And he also wrote a book about his experience about his dad transitioning to womanhood, and spoiler alert, it was not easy. And I think it's amazing because Paula, she remained the dad. The dad is now a woman, so being a dad isn't necessarily a part of your masculinity. It covers something bigger than that. My son Ray, I love him very much, and I'm really happy. I was a reluctant father. I was reluctant to become a father. And I'm very happy with what I got. If I could have picked him out of a catalog, it wouldn't have been so much different. So he is a kid that, if there's a choice between yes and no, he will usually go for yes. He is up for a lot of stuff. He's up for trying a lot of stuff. He likes doing things. He's very social. He loves being with people. He loves traveling. We go look at art together. He's awesome, and I love hanging out with him.
According to a May 2023 study by the Fatherhood Project on fathers' impact on child development, children with actively involved fathers are 43% more likely to earn A's in school. 33% are less likely to repeat a grade than those without engaged dads. There's no rule book to being a dad. Men make mistakes and the journey is often fraught, but it's one that many agree is worth taking.
I do think it's one of my jobs as a father to really reinforce that you don't need to be walking through the world thinking you need to be like twice as good or thinking you're less than because you're not the best. I'm just really wanting to bring children in the world that have a sense of identity and self-acceptance, and that they have value before they produce anything or become anything or have anything, that intrinsically, because I was born, I have value and I deserve good things and I deserve good relationships and I deserve a good life. My name is Stephen Beasley. I am a musician and public health advocate, and I am a father. I was around a lot of people who were single all of their life, male and female. And then I had some folks who had some exemplary marriages. And then there were some marriages that just really did not work at all. So I took a little piece of every marriage that I was around, and also a lot from the people who were single. My mother was born in Southern California, and then their family made their way to Louisville when she was small. That's where my dad grew up as well. So they met in the late 70s, and they were both teenagers, and then this happened. And they were very young. They absolutely should have never been married or anything like that. And by the time I really came into consciousness, I had only ever known them as separate entities. My relationship with my father was never bad. When I was born, my father was sort of thrust into fatherhood. Once we get to the 1990s and my father's in his 30s, I see a person, and I've talked about it with him, who is really going deep about his intentions, about how he was going to raise me and the other young men that he was responsible for. I mean, he really dug very deep and really operated in a way that was very different from the framework that he was operating in as a single man. And so some of that introspection made our relationship deep. I always felt like he was just a little bit too much in my face. He just seemed to be omnipresent for a season, and that was intense for me. Just having a lot to say about my appearance or my decisions. I mean, as he should. I mean, he was my father. But then there would be large swaths of time where he wasn't. When I was sort of handling my business, quote unquote, as a child, and I didn't really need instruction, he didn't give it. So that's kind of cool too, right? Ava is a rambunctious, increasingly loud, very affectionate 22-month-old. She is obsessed with things that move or things that have specific sounds. So from her bedroom window, she can see cars, and so she starts doing this because they have wheels. In the arc of my story, children were for me something that I knew could happen if someone who really loved me wanted them. And when I look back in the history of my family, the presence of children or children living in someone's household is just something that just happens. But we made a choice to do the fatherhood thing, and that really gives me some joy.
I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
Charlotte Lopez is this woman from Kenya. We met on Tinder, and we just found that we were both in this place of being ready to get serious. We came to a number of children. We came to some values about marriage and family and trajectory, and then we moved forward. I have a great appreciation of my father's style of parenting. I think the way that he was looking deep and looking around is a parallel that I have with my father's parenting style. I think that my father chose his words pretty carefully, the good and the bad, and I appreciate that. And I think he's still choosing what he says very carefully. And I think I accept that as love.
We'll be back after this break. And now, a personal tribute to fatherhood from one of our colleagues here at CUNY TV. Our reporter, Kyung Yoon, looks back to the Korean War more than 70 years ago and proudly tells us how her own dad helped save hundreds of American soldiers during that devastating war.
아빠하고 나하고 만든 꽃밭에.
This is my father and me singing a beloved Korean children's song that he taught me when I was a little girl.
기였습니다.
The song tells a story of a father and child planting flowers in a garden. One of my earliest memories is singing this song with my dad, who has planted seeds of generosity and sacrifice throughout his life. He's always been a hero to me. 70 years ago, my father was a young army captain fighting in the Korean War. On June 25, 1950, the communist North Korean government launched a surprise attack on the Republic of Korea in the south. In 3 days, the North Korean army, supported by the Soviet Union, had captured the southern capital city of Seoul. The United Nations Security Council immediately voted to send international military forces to support South Korea. The first UN ground forces to enter the battle was Task Force Smith, made up of about 540 men of the U.S. 24th Infantry Division and the 52nd Field Artillery Battalion. My father had been training with the American soldiers of the 52nd in Kyushu, Japan, when they received orders to immediately deploy to Korea.
그 부대가 한국 전장에 저번이가 디스패치 되게 됐다고. 그러니까 와서 아무것도 모르니까 저 한국 chief of staff 캡틴 그 당시 난 캡틴인데 캡틴 연을 달라고. We don't know anything about Korea. The train, the people. 어떻게 그 당한 한국 코리안 chief of staff가 해가지고서 나를 미국 부대로 가라고 그래서.
Because a liaison officer. Liaison officer.
Liaison officer.
On July 5, 1950, my father was embedded with Task Force Smith when they made a stand in Osan City in what would go down in history as the first battle of UN forces in the Korean War. The goal was to delay the North Korean advance. My father was the only South Korean in that battle.
중미령이라는데 거기에서 나오는데 인민군이 그때 러시안 메이드 탱크를 가지고서 페네트레이트 쫙 해가지고서 미국 저 타스크 포스 스미스가 말하자면 엠플로이드 당했어.
The soldiers of Task Force Smith were outnumbered nearly 10-1 by the 5,000 North Korean infantry, but fought courageously. Many died in the battle, and Task Force Smith was eventually forced to retreat. My father was in the first jeep, navigating the harrowing retreat through unfamiliar terrain, with so many lives hanging in the balance. But ultimately, he was able to lead some 200 soldiers to safety.
내가 앞장을 서가지고 저 포스트 지프에 타고 거기 남아있던 한 미군 한 200명 가량의 그 차를 갖다 다 빼가지고서 해가지고서 내가 앞장 서가지고서 빠져나와서 살았다고. 그 자리에 저 인민군 노스코리안 인펜트리맨이 한 시간 후에 우리가 있던 자리에 도착을 했대. 그러니까 그 한 시간만 늦었으면은 아버지도 그렇고 모든 200명의 저 프리즌 오브 워가 됐던가 그러지 않으면 죽었던가 그랬을 거야.
My father fought many more battles during the Korean War. But he also found love when he met my mother during the war, and the two were married on a cold January day in 1953, 7 months before an armistice officially ended the conflict. My father was eventually promoted to Major General in the South Korean Army and posted as military attaché to Washington, D.C.
From his service with Task Force Smith in the opening battle of the Korean War, to his continuing support to soldiers of both nations' armies, through professional development presentations, Major General retired Yoon has earned a place of honor in the history of the U.S. Army.
For his service to Korea and the United States, he was honored by the American military in July of 2020 at Camp Humphreys in Korea, the largest U.S. overseas military base, where a major installation gate was named after him. He's grateful for his life and to have been given the chance to see his children grow up and have children of their own. The foundation for his life is his faith in God, handed down to him by his mother.
마더가 나를 위해 가지고서 밤낮 기도를 한 거라. 그렇게 기도의 힘으로 내가 그렇게 많은 사람을 같이 살리고 죽지 않고 그렇게 된 게 어머니의 기도지.
Soldier, hero, diplomat, and to me, a father who taught me about courage, faith, love, and how to bloom wherever I'm planted.
피었습니다. 와! I love you.
That's our show. If you want to know more about the guests we featured, check out our Instagram page at Shades of Us TV and online at tv.cuny.edu. I'm Darryl Brown. See you next time on Shades of Us.